All right, welcome back to N.Cast. I'm your co-host, Prince Ayo, and I have a special guest here. His name is Gabe Charles.
What's going on, fellas?
Hey, what's up? What's
Appreciate
up?
you
and
having
ladies
me on.
too, if you are watching, you don't discriminate on this show. But today we're actually going to talk about a little about spiritual enlightenment, anywhere from alchemy to pineal gland to open up your third eye, and just touching on that subject for the new year, 2021. And my friend Gabe here is going to explain a lot more about it. So before we get into that, just give us a little background of where you're from, Gabe.
Background. So I'm from Olney, Maryland. So born and raised. So I've known you since Brick Grove days.
I didn't come till 07.
Farquhar.
05.
Farquhar, right?
Farquhar,
Yeah. So I remember, being a minority there. We were like one of the few black people
right.
in the hallways. So it's just crazy seeing how we, from that's like a decade plus to now and just where we are in life. But yeah, I'm from Olney, Maryland, born and raised. I got 3 brothers, born and raised too. So a lot of people from the community know the Charles family. But my day job, I'm in pharma sales, and by night I'm a visionary, a creative. I have a website and a organization called the Greater Thinking Collective. Okay. So definitely look out for us in the future. We gear our content around like guided meditations, holistic health, fostering spirituality. So if you're looking for a space to just connect, talk to a community that's trying to figure life out, just like yourself, definitely feel free to tap in. We're on Instagram as well. And I know, looking forward to definitely new collaborations in the year.
Yeah.
I've been watching you doing your thing, man. It's great.
It's been a journey. I'll say that much. It's been a journey.
For real, man.
Yeah.
But it's the motivation and inspiration. So I love seeing people that, you kind of grew up with doing great things like you. So, man, appreciate you having me on here.
No problem, man. But that all being said, just going off a journey, speaking of spirituality, what made you get into holistic meditation and like spiritual enlightenment and like not wokeness and like social media wokeness, but like in spiritual enlightened wokeness? What made you like tap into that?
That's a great question. Honestly, there was one moment in 3rd grade. So this is a lot going back to 3rd grade.
It goes way back.
But I would say that was like the beginning of becoming more conscious or aware, and trying to understand purpose in life. And I remember, so growing up where we did, being a minority, you might be like the only black person out of the class. And I remember a fellow student, he was new actually, and he was talking to one of my friends at the time, and he said, I just overheard him talking, and he was like, don't hang out with that kid. That kid's going to get you in trouble. Mind you, I've only been at this school since 2nd grade, so I'm a new kid, never been in trouble or anything like that. So in my mind, I'm just like,
wait, they said don't hang out with you?
Yeah.
Okay, right.
And I'm just like, why would he say that? Like, I've literally done nothing to give somebody that indication, to say that. And I thought about it, and it hurt me on the inside, and I was just like trying to process.
Because they didn't know you.
Exactly. Yeah. Never had any issues or anything like that. And so then it clicked, like it had to be because I'm black. And so that identity piece, and at that moment, and this is me just intellectualizing this internally, I was just like, you know what? From this day moving forward, I'm going to make sure that I'm an example to my peers to help keep their minds open. So that way they're not going to treat other people like that or to hold, stereotypes, prejudice, et cetera, et cetera.
Discrimination.
Exactly. So that was 3rd grade, and then take that up until maybe 9th grade. Like middle school, I read a few books that was definitely influential, like the Da Vinci Code and Angels and Demons, and hearing about the Vatican and all of that. I've always had a philosophical personality or mindset. So I just wanted to understand more about the world and like, why is there so much gray area? There's talks about these religions. Growing up in a community where I'm immersed with, I have a Christian background, but I also grew up with people of Jewish backgrounds and being invited to like bar mitzvahs and bat mitzvahs and I have Muslim friends as well, and
Do you have questions in the sense of how they all were related, or questions of why they were separated, but they all have like sort of the same background story?
Honestly, both okay. Exactly. So I love how I would be able to see these basic defining principles in all of these major religions. And it's just like, so where's the dividing line, and why has there been so much strife and just, you know, issues that have stemmed from that? And so that, reading about, you know, like the Da Vinci Code, which talks about like the Illuminati, you know, secret societies, and just, I just went down this rabbit hole of trying to understand why, where is the truth, and how can I find the truth? And that just added to my journey of myself, trying to polish the self and the awareness of the soul, you know, understanding that, you know, everyone has a soul. You know, my body, I'm a soul. There's a dweller within this body that's operating everything, that's watching.
Correct.
And I know that perfectly correlates to the pineal gland or pineal gland. There's different pronunciations, or the third eye, and how that can correlate to. So many people think the third eye is like the seat of the soul. It's that ability to have insight. It's the only part in our body, the only organ in our body that doesn't have
intuition too.
Exactly. Yep. Definitely intuition.
That's another common way of saying it too. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. And so if you look at the dimensions of man, there's a duality aspect. So like we have 2 arms, 2 legs, 2 feet, 2 eyes, 2 nostrils, you know, things like that. The heart, how it can be split in half. The pineal gland is the only part in our body that's just singular, which is pretty interesting. And so you have 2 eyes to see, 1 to understand is a common motto with the third eye. So just hearing about all of these things is what put me down this rabbit hole of trying to seek the truth and understanding. And maybe it's just we're all tangled in some form of semantics, where there's language and, you know, there's a name for God in one religion, and there's a name in something else. Yeah. But a lot of times they can mean the same things. And even with Christianity and the Muslim faith or culture or teachings, people don't realize that in the Quran they reference Jesus so many times.
I guess they also see him as a prophet too, because I know it's also in Judaism too.
They do.
So, yeah.
So that already there helps, in a way, justify or confirm some truths, as far as there was a great man who, obviously, if he's still cherished and respected in this faith that doesn't necessarily claim him as the Son of God or God in the flesh, but
part of the Trinity, I guess.
Right. But they see him as this prominent figure who was pretty much like the pillar of humanity, or what humanity should aspire to be. Maybe we're focusing too much on the messenger and not the message itself. And so there's danger with saying that, but it's understanding that semantics and the game of like telephone, where the message over time, as it's relayed, it's changed, it's altered, and there's different understandings of that name. And so, and going back to the Bible, when you're talking about Jesus, like in his own words, he's telling people that you can do all these things if you listen to the Father. Like, I'm connected to the Father. So if you follow my path, which I've laid out before you, you're also sons of the Father. And so in a way, he's saying that you guys can ascend to this level that I'm at now and do more. Because he was taken out at 33. And like 33 is also a very important number. It's very symbolic, you know, like 33 vertebrae.
It's not seen as like coincidence, I guess, because 33, duality, and it's connecting to life and spirituality too. So.
Right.
Is that also with sevens too?
Sevens, and how 7 can represent completion and like 7 days in the week. So yes, there's a lot with numerology.
I know 3 is like a major one, but I wasn't too sure about 7, so that's why I had to ask about that.
7 was one of my favorite numbers.
But just to dial back real quick, I was just while you were talking, I was thinking how like religion kind of is like relatable to sports. You know how like it's like which is the better team, or like it's which is the better team. It's like which is the right religion you should be worshiping. I always felt that whenever I went to like, cause I grew up in a Christian household too, and like growing up, you think like, okay, Christianity, everybody's worshiping that, and then you meet new people in walks of life, and then like they study or practice other religion, and they're like, oh, I kind of have this bias thinking like, oh, maybe they're a lost soul, or maybe like they're not, like they just haven't found Christ yet. They just dialed into something else. But really, it's just like, nah, they all interconnect. It's just that I don't practice what they practice at the same time, like growing up. So
that exactly, and that's a great point, because growing up, like I'm a kid, but I'm also being welcomed into these different homes of different religions, and still seeing those defining basic traditions or principles there. And it's like, so what if there's this isolated community that was always taught whatever tradition that they're taught, and they practice love, harmony, the basics, like no murder, no stealing, you know, coveting another man's wife, things like that. And going back like to the Crusades and just how there was a lot of persecution, and that was literally a direct contradiction to the own teachings in the book. And so that's where, like, quick analogy, BLM as an organization can be stained easily when you have a few extremists, or, you know, in anything, even with like the Islam faith, where there's extremists who then do these things, and then people look at the religion they claim as the blanket for all of these actions, when really it's, you have to be able to decipher and use that third eye.
Yeah, compartmentalize, I guess, too, because that also comes with like maturity too. Like when you're young and have a naive mind, it's really hard to compartmentalize because you don't have as much knowledge background, and you're only like raised with what you're taught with, or what you read, or what you were allowed to read at the time.
Exactly. So
coming with age, you start compartmentalizing, start understanding like, okay, this, I have a little bit more knowledge of this background, so maybe it doesn't align with what I usually know, but at least I can understand like where they're coming from, and or get to know more about it as you age. So
exactly. And so like shadow work, which I'm sure a lot of you have heard about and are going through right now. Like me, going through my shadow work, that was a part of going back into my childhood self and being able to forgive that person who said to that my other friend, like, don't hang out with him, he's bad news. And a part of me just understood, like, maybe he was just taught that. And the person who taught him that could have done that literally out of like self-preservation, or a way to think that he's protecting his child. And that's, through my third eye, I also understand, like, when people talk about good and evil, I feel like the potency of evil isn't as bad as people think it is. There are certain evil people, but it looks like there's certain instances that cause people to do evil acts. And so when we talk about like racism, for example, I know we're kind of shifting here.
I mean, still enlightening for racism, especially what happened. We're recording right now. It's January 6th. Or no, it's January 10th?
Yep.
11th? 10th?
10th.
Okay. It's January 10th. And, like, recording January 10th, 2021, there was a big riot and, like, terrorist attack on January 6th, 2021 at D.C. It's a historical moment. I mean, they already have it up on Wikipedia. You can look it up. Like, it's a historical moment, but it just shows like it's an enlightening period because there's a coup. Yeah. There was a coup, right? Like, it was a takeover of like a government building when, believe it or not, it was a lot of white terrorists, right? Extremist terrorists who were taking over that period, and it just showed the hypocrisy, right? The hypocrisy and like what Black Americans have been trying to explain for years of what's going on. Like, there is such thing as like white privilege, whether it's economic standards or social status standards. Like, there is a big difference. And if Black people or people of color were to do what they did on that day, they'd have been shot dead before even entering the building. And that's what a lot of people are trying to explain. And it's just showing how like this is the type of world we live in. Like, there's differences in our worlds, like whether you want to believe it or not, or maybe you have to show as many examples. Yes, there's an accountability part, but there's also like a reality part to it too. Like, just because of someone's skin color, they're going to be treated differently. All right. So
and it's like, how long are people going to defend their right to be wrong? Because we can waste so much energy going back and forth, and I've definitely engaged with people online because I do feel like one of the greatest ways for us to help that unity, and that correlates with spirituality as far as
it's enlightened periods.
Understanding, being connected to something that's greater than ourselves. And so with that, we can feel, there's many people who feel innate purposes that drive them to do whatever they do. And sometimes, that might drive me to engage in certain conversations, but also learning when I need to pull myself back for the sake of, my inner wellness, my inner peace. And, like the saying goes, it's if you argue with a fool or an idiot, someone who's watching you, it's going to be hard for them to tell which one's the idiot.
Because y'all are both going to not be saying the same language. But that also dials back to your shadow work, because, like, shadow work is not, like, usually shadow work is only known for, like, nice people, right? Mm-hmm. People always want to have, like, this good status and always want to, like, not relate to, like, evil and not embrace it. Mm-hmm. No one's, like, dark side. That's mm-hmm. usually terminology that's used in shadow work, dark side. But if you don't embrace that side, it consumes you. From what mm-hmm. my understanding of what I studied from shadow work, it consumes you. And then when you get to a boiling point, you kind of black out in your mind and you don't even realize, like, why you did what you did, which mm-hmm. was like an evil act. And a lot of people who don't understand that or are not consciously aware of that, mm-hmm. they commit an act and they don't know that that was a part of them. Really, they were just suppressing something that was, like, not in, that was in them and they didn't even realize.
They didn't even realize it.
And that just dials back to what you're saying, like, proving people who were wrong this entire time. I think it's because they want to have, like, this higher status, like, oh, I'm a abiding citizen, I pay my taxes. If you do the same thing, you be treated the same way. Mm-hmm. And, like, they put themselves in, like, a golden status, and it's just like, mm-hmm. like, you're capable of killing someone just like I'm capable of killing someone. You know what I mean? Like, right. Like, it just brings back the humanity in people. And that's what hypocrisy does too, right? Mm-hmm. Like, the worst, it's not even about being racist, it's not even about being sexist or xenophobia. The worst thing you could be in this world is a hypocrite, right? Even mm-hmm. though there's a lot of white lies, there's a lot of lies and stuff. Like, the worst thing you could be is
a disillusionment.
Disillusionment of being a hypocrite,
yeah.
Right? Like, that's the worst thing you can be in this planet. And, like, obviously, we all have a little hypocrisy in all of us, but we mm-hmm. try to work through it because we recognize it, right?
Exactly. Being able to acknowledge the flaws, knowing that we're not perfect. But like, what I hate is, I'm sure you've heard so many different examples of this when someone is like, I'm the way, that's just how I am, and if you don't like it, you can leave. And how toxic that is, because that's just saying,
at the age of, like, 17, okay, I'll be like, you're young, right? But, like, when you're saying that and you're almost 30, it's like
something's wrong.
That's something that you're not trying to. That's like a root that you're just not trying to budge mm-hmm. or grow from. Mm-hmm. But, like, continue. That's the only thing I was gonna say. Like, yeah, it's different when you're saying that when you're 16, 17 years old. It's like, okay, right. They can
the
grow.
Maturity aspect of what you can expect, and that's also just looking at the news and everything, seeing how, like, when you get to a certain age of consciousness or awareness, and you've been living on this earth long enough, you kind of realize that age and maturity, they're correlated, but they're not always directly correlated.
They're not aligned at
exactly.
all. People mature at different ages. So, like, mm-hmm. even though I said what I said about 17 to, like, 26, 27, 20, mm-hmm. 30, people mature at different levels, mm-hmm. especially men and women. So, like, everybody's not going to grow up at the same, like, we're both, right. like, 28, 29 years mm-hmm. old. Like, people are probably not going to mature until 33. Mm-hmm. People mature faster, like 26. Like, everybody has their different elevation in their mind when they, right. like, grow to maturity.
And some people, through their life, everything they've wanted might have been handed to them, or they've been very successful at an early age. And so with that success can come an illusion of, because I'm so successful financially, or, I got the trophy wife that I wanted, and I got the house and car, that creates this veil that every other aspect of my life is already taken care of. And so that also is what creates the rift with this world today, because you got a lot of people who, they've been straight financially, but if you look at them spiritually, they're lacking. They're not equally yoked on all aspects. And so you see that a lot in today with maturity. Like, I'm looking at on Facebook, and you see people who are supporting Trump, and it's like, Trump is, like, one of the most immature people you can see to be a leader. How he's very ego driven. He's an egomaniac, and he can be narcissistic.
But that just taps into what you were saying. Like, he was because he gets his money from Trump Real Estate, which his father owned in New York in the 1970s. So like he was never had to like work to have a business. He's always been in business, right? Like from basically the day he was born.
Right.
So almost everything was handed to him.
He was born into wealth.
So, yeah, exactly. So like everything was handed to him. So it's like he had room to like fail in business and be like, oh, it didn't go my way, but I'm still gonna do this, do that. It's still gonna go my way. So like when he became like the president, the leader, and things weren't going his way, and trying to figure out why people don't like him, is because he had poor social skills. He had poor judgment of character, poor morality, right? So it's just like.
And lacking in emotional intelligence.
Yeah, very lack of emotional intelligence. So it's just like he didn't. I feel like he didn't understand that, but at the same time didn't care because of his narcissistic trait. Now I'm not a psychologist, so I can't just like say he's a narcissist. But like if you look up narcissism, like you might as well put Trump's picture right there. Like you might as well put it right there.
A lot of examples that would support that.
Yeah. But like it just shows like people are tired of it. And like I said, January 6, 2021 was like an enlightenment moment, right? Like it was just an enlightenment moment, time of just showing like, yeah.
We really came full circle.
It's a paradigm shift. Like, yeah, it came full circle. It's time to like move forward and see like for what the world is actually like for people of color and for white people. Like it's two completely different worlds, two completely different mindsets. Even though we're all human. Nobody's denying that we are all human, but most humans aren't treated the same because of this unseen like social hierarchy that like a lot of people don't like want to pay attention to because they're not living outside of it.
Right.
You know? So.
Right. And there's so many bubbles and just
attention to because they're not living outside of it.
Right.
You know? So.
Right. And there's so many bubbles and just things. So going back to that part about what I was saying about evil being the potency of evil and how there's people who are, yes, like you see them and they're like the face of the devil. They're pure evil.
Right.
And then there's other people who, based on their life experiences, their trajectory of their life, and how well they internalize and intellectualize those experiences, that all plays a factor in how they see the life through whatever lens they're looking at. And so going back to like that kid who said whatever he did, his dad could have had something like, to me, that's like an evil act to, be racist. But being able to see things, so third eye, being able to see things from like a full view instead of just one lens, is understanding that I'm sure he loves his son and his family very much, and he's a great guy to his neighbors and everything like that. But because of whatever experiences he's had, he's helped grow and condition his mind to see black people a certain way. And so and that's where
media does influence that. That's
media. And it's crazy.
We're lucky. This our generation now. Like when you were younger, it was like early 2000s. Third grade, second grade, you said? Early 2000, they were more dependent on television media, which is programmed media. So, like, a lot of, like, Fox News was thriving, CNN was thriving. So they would give certain perception about people of color, certain perception about white people. It's like, it was just, the Western media did have a heavy influence. I mean, even BBC, that's a global media station, that does have a heavy influence on the world. So, yeah. Like,
and with semantics. So I bet y'all didn't know this. Media, the name media, if you look at the etymology, media is actually the goddess of illusion.
Yeah.
And so just that story is crazy in itself about what the media can do with us as well, and how it can be corrupting, or it can put us under an illusion just for what we feed ourselves every day. And like if you only watch Fox, you're only going to see things from one side of the coin. If you only watch CNN or anything else, we have to train ourselves to be able to look at things objectively, and then to be able to use inductive and deductive reasoning too. So
it's crazy because like you heard of the film Born of a Nation, right? Not the most recent one. I'm talking.
I haven't seen it.
Okay, so there's one that it's probably one of the first films in Western media. It came out like 1910. Born of a Nation, and like it was literally like one of the first like movie film. I think it's late 1800s, 1910, maybe the latest, and it went global, right? And it just had this like horrific like perception of black man. I think the storyline is like this black guy like kidnapped this white woman, and then like they had like a mob go after the black guy, but the black character was painted in blackface. It was a white guy playing it.
Okay.
Yeah.
I remember seeing a picture of that.
And like it was just, and like I think the poster was just like the black guy was holding the white woman over his head, but they like try to perceive him as more like a gorilla.
Mm-hmm.
But it's supposed to be like a black man, and like try to take away like that white woman, or they kidnap her and stuff like that, and put her in danger. And like imagine that being like one of the first movies like ever in cinema to like just go global, and like it just feeds from there.
Right. Because you see the racism all over the world in many forms, and in isolated communities. How else are they shaping their perspective, their realities from? You know. So, yeah, that's deep, man. So, shifting to spiritual alchemy. As far as just transforming the soul, understanding that we are souls occupying bodies. And also understanding that man is trifold in his existence, which is like there's mind, body, and soul. And so from spiritual alchemy, just talking about just alchemy in general. And so a lot of times when I think of alchemy, I'm thinking of like these mad scientists in these labs, these dark labs with a whole bunch of glass beakers and boiling water and everything like that. So there's been an issue or like a controversy where alchemy, you might have heard like the Philosopher's Stone. You've heard of the Philosopher's Stone?
Not Philosopher's Stone, but like the perception of alchemy, I've heard of that. Like how like presentation about it.
The Philosopher's Stone is said to be like a material or an element that could transform or transmute things into like a higher complex being or element. Okay. So people were trying to find the Philosopher's Stone to turn lead into gold, which you might have heard that like people were trying to hack or figure out the way to convert lead into gold. And so there's so many people, and this used to be a huge thing, like going back to like the 16th century, where there's people who are just searching and they're dedicating their entire lives to figuring out how to create the Philosopher's Stone. And the thing that they missed is understanding that the only way, so the basic principle with alchemy is you have to start with pure materials.
Right.
It might take a while, it might take a journey, because you have to go to different lands to find elements or minerals or metals that are pure, that don't have purities.
Yeah.
And so that can be an analogy to our life, as far as it might take time to purify or to figure out those pure aspects of ourselves. And understanding that that's step one to actually reaching that like ascension of our spirit, is understanding that we have to purify ourselves. And so I just love how that concept with alchemy, like the physical alchemy of like working and transforming things, correlates to the spiritual alchemy of ourselves and trying to figure out how to reach that ascension that we're looking for. And by doing that, like shadow work literally is a purification. Just working on those things that we might not want to acknowledge or that we keep under the rug. Because shadow work could even be like if you were childhood traumas, like if you were raped, molested, if you saw a death, if you were beat, anything like that. And going back to that childhood self, or even that earlier self that endured those things, and being able to nurture yourself to a point where you're not as reactory, you're not reacting as much to certain things, or being able to be triggered by certain things.
There's a saying, if you don't work on like your childhood traumas by yourself, it's going to come out in your romantic relationships. I've been seeing that go around a couple of times now, and it's kind of true. Like,
that's real, man.
Because a lot of people lack communication in relationships. That's kind of where it tends to fail. And really, it's because like if you don't really understand that person from like a fundamental level, and why they react certain ways to certain things, then just going to be a misinterpretation in the communication flow. So, yeah, I mean, it's very important. Shadow work is very important. I feel like a lot of people are coming to terms with it as they get a little bit older. But
even with like forgiving people of the past, forgiving parents, and like that's just forgiving people who might have taken advantage of you, lied to you, stole whatever they did. Something that I do a lot, and it's like think of yourself as a custodian of your mind. Like your mind's a guardian a garden, and you're the custodian, and there's times where weeds, you can pluck them, but if you don't pluck them just enough, it's going to grow back eventually. And knowing that you got to be vigilant enough to constantly guard in your mind. And that can happen at times where, think someone does something to you, and you might not have thought about it for a long time, but then something happens that triggers that memory, and then you might be going down the understanding generational curses, and you can even itemize them to just the different flaws or trials and tribulations that you saw your parents deal with their parents, your grandparents, and what your grandparents dealt with their parents, and trying to make sure that we're doing what we can to polish. When you look at humanity as, if you just looked at the soul of humanity, the soul to me is still very young. It's, regardless of how long we've been on this planet, to me it's very young. And so the beauty is we have history to be able to look at how many times we've repeated it ourselves in certain cycles. And when we look at family history, we get to look at, for those that are able to at least go back into their family lineage. And I can only go so far, being like where my ancestors were slaves, and then so on and so forth.
Or your family like based in American, like,
mm-hmm.
okay.
So, and I've done Ancestry.com, and so like a big hit was like Nigerian, and so it was pretty dope. And then even a little bit of Native American was on there.
Native American, majority of them are black, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, like the journey of man is crazy.
A lot of people are like,
I could talk about that
because every time I
forever.
like look at them, like, why are their skin so like dark?
Mm-hmm.
But then it's just like, a lot of people from Africa and like BC era traveled out.
Mm-hmm.
That's why
all over the world.
Yeah, all over the world. So like,
and
people don't
Pangea.
realize that. But go ahead.
And if you like look at Pangea conceptually, like the tectonic plates of all these continents, how it's crazy how they match up with other continents.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to squeeze everything together, and so like that even right there helps make the journey of man even easier as far as like the how. But back to seeing the generational curses, like understanding, that's why I like, while your parents and grandparents are here, talk to them and try to get as much information you can, so that way you at least understand the history of the why behind certain things. And you can't get that just by asking them. You have to spend time and just talking, because that way you'll trigger things that they haven't thought about for years. And then they'll share an experience that they might, to them it's trivial, but to you it gives so much background to the why for why they did something, or how they might have raised my father a certain way or my mother a certain way, and why they might do certain things. And so it's just getting that information, going back to like the soul of the man. Think about like the soul of your family line, and how you have all of these people behind you and all the energy that it took for us to be existing right here today.
You know what I think of when you say that? Remember that episode on Avatar: Last Airbender?
Mm-hmm.
And Aang was like, I guess he was like in the clouds. He was talking to like a spiritual being. I forgot the name of it. And he was looking at his like the previous avatars. Yeah, the previous avatars,
Mm-hmm.
and the lineage just went back for like centuries. And I think about literally, I was thinking about what you were saying when you said that.
For real though, like think about that. It's crazy when you think about that. And so spirituality, like that, even why in a lot of the last couple of years of my life, I've also tried to connect to that African spirituality side of things, because understanding that, like going back to like how BLM has been stained, and there's different organizations where there's extremists, and knowing that the church has extremists, and there's people that have done things in the name of religion that were clearly hypocritical and evil. Like if just on paper, if we're just looking at this on paper, these acts objectively are clear contradictions of the craft or the teachings of the book. And so going back there, that's how it's easy to see with Christianity that there's people that did a lot under the name, like the Crusades, for example, and it could have been for self-preservation of the church power. Like even understanding marriage was created as a way to control power of the church, because there had to be a pope, there had to be someone ordained who could actually grant you the permission to be married.
Yeah.
And it was a conscious decision because they would look at, okay, are both families going to keep interests of the church in hand? All right, cool. We'll approve of this because that's also going to keep power in the church. So it's just interesting understanding the true history, but not letting that get into the way of your spiritual development also. Because that's where I think a lot of people get lost is they know like, okay, well, this book has been rewritten. There's omissions and things, and they got priests and popes doing this, X, Y, and Z. So why should I believe this? But this still is one of the greatest books ever written because there's so much. It really is a living text where you can read it 5 years ago and you can read it today. Same scripture, same lines, and get a completely different meaning out of it. And so, like Psalms and Proverbs, those are probably my favorite. So I definitely think it's good to be able to, maybe it's more of like an omnipresent, not an omnipresent, an omnitheistic approach, where it's not omnitheistic because that's like multiple gods.
Well, that's what I thought you
but
meant.
it's,
Like
it's
from
more
different
so
religions, omnitheistic. That's why I thought you meant that. But
what I'm getting at is basically you can honor and you can see the truth. Like there's many streams that can lead back to one.
That's what I thought.
And so that's what I mean as far as you can look at these different religions or texts and still get the basics, and then understanding that the soul within can be that inner teacher for all of us if we tap in. And if you tap in, like I'll use the example of, I believe it was Peter. Like Jesus wasn't the only person who walked on water. It was also Peter who he had walk over to him, and when like the wind, he started walking, and it was by faith.
Yeah, he lost.
And when the
faith,
wind blew, he got nervous or whatever. His faith wavered, and then he started to sink, and then he was able to get it back, and that's when he was like walking.
Didn't you say like because you broke eye contact or you lost faith in me or something
I think
like that?
it was the faith. It was
yeah.
The wind caused him to feel discouraged, or his faith wavered for a second, and that's when the physical manifestation of that happened. And then when he got back on that frequency or that wavelength, he was good. And so he was definitely like a prominent figure in Christian teachings, but he only knew Jesus for a short amount of time.
Yeah. It was so strange.
And so I say that to say about like the inner teacher within, that can correlate to what the Holy Spirit is as the teacher, or like the trifold existence of man, that's like mind, body, soul. And so I've seen this where when you really open yourself up for that spiritual journey, just to learn and to improve yourself and to become a part of something that's greater than yourself, you go down a rabbit hole where every day is like a magical journey. Like you might hear somebody talk about something that you were just reading about. And to me, that's confirmation. There's so many coincidences that people might choose to ignore, but the more you get into it and you're exercising that third eye, that spiritual vision, to be able to see that intuition of things that aren't clearly like visible to the naked eye.
Yeah.
When you do that, your every day is literally like a magical journey because you do see so many constances. You might see it in numbers. You might see it in your everyday car that you see by, or colors or anything. It's so many different ways that it's like something beyond yourself is guiding or aiding you to your development. And I think that's also a good way to look at your hardships and just understand that there's a greater purpose in this, and that once I overcome this, it's going to make a great story. And I've definitely used that to get me through some difficult times. And there are natural laws with the world. And going back to what you're saying about teams and like which team do I root for, I think that there's a big misconception with prayer, or people understanding prayer. Prayer, you can back prayer with science so easily. Like as far as thoughts are vibration, energy is a vibration. So every time we're thinking of your brain as like a radio frequency, just sending out waves into the universe. And energy is neither created nor destroyed.
I think when I say focus, that's what I mean. Majority of the time, even though I don't blatantly say focus means frequency. When I say focus, whenever I type it out, I'm talking about frequency. When I'm talking about vibration, because I know the power of like vibration and sound, and like whatever you're focused on is where your frequency is going to follow. And that's at least how I think of it as.
Yeah.
And it's even though like manifestation, focusing on it, it's not just going to appear like that. Like you got to work towards it. I'm really a big believer like you have to work towards it. You got to figure it out. You
can't just pray and be lazy and just
it's gonna come one day, and I'm like, you're gonna come one day while you on the street. Like that's how it's gonna work. Like, like that's what's gonna happen.
Exactly.
Like,
and that's where we mess up. Like, as far as that culture of just pray about it. Like praying, yes, of course, because praying sets the intention of what you want.
It's kind of like a meditation.
Then, exactly. Prayer and meditation are perfectly synonymous to me, and that's where I say, like, set the intention, but also understand the natural laws that we live under. Like, so actually, a really good person to look up if you're ever trying to read or just listen to certain lectures about spirituality or esoteric teachings or anything like that is Manly Palmer Hall, and I remember him saying something along the lines of, "You shouldn't pray for something that you're not willing to earn." And by willing, that means like if you're not willing to do the hard work, then are you really worthy of this, whatever this blessing is bestowed upon you? And also understanding that you can't pray for something that's going to cause disfavor to somebody else. And so that's like you can pray for the best outcome. And even when it comes to like praying for your team, you can't pray for a team to win the Super Bowl. So people that do this, people that consciously pray like for a team to win, while you mean well, there's still a disconnect or not a complete understanding to your ability and what you're trying to manifest.
It's not in your control.
Exactly.
Either like you're praying for somebody else's like outcome. Like that's not it's not gonna be your outcome because you're not working towards it. You're just watching your team work towards it, and they're in control of what's going to happen to their destiny, not you or your prayer. Like,
and what about those other moms on the other team who are praying for their kids, to win? So it's like there isn't a harmony in that, and there's a misunderstanding of that connection, because when you're praying, you're tapping into something that's not in the physical realm. It's nothing that you can visibly see.
But before you continue, I was going to go back to you're praying for something that you didn't work hard for. It kind of like contradicts your like, whether you want to call it faith or destiny, either or. I know some people like say there's a difference, but like your direction in life. If the higher being, let's call it higher being, just for lack of better terms, higher being gives you what you want, what you've been praying for, and you didn't work hard towards it. When it comes to difficult moments, how are you going to act because you didn't like work towards it? That's how I think of it as, like, you didn't work
integrity.
towards it. Yeah,
like, are you really going to value something the same?
Yeah. And like, I guess some people can like give a rebuttal, like you see con men do it all the time, but yeah, they get found out eventually because like they get presented with something that they haven't seen before, or like they just don't know how to get themselves out of. And it's just like that makes people more skeptical of who that person was, and like you said, their integrity.
Right.
So it's just very interesting how like that comes back in full circle. Like if you're praying for something that you didn't work hard for, but you feel like you believe that that's what you want or that's what you need in your life, and it doesn't work out as planned.
Right.
When it comes to a hard part in life, I guess.
Right. And understand, like, con man or the people that you see are that do commit very evil acts on paper, or it's easy to see it looks like they have it all. Like, as far as they got the nice cars, the nice clothes, the houses, they can travel and eat whatever they want, but their spiritual health is lacking. And a man is in danger when he is consumed with his selfishness, and understanding that prayer and really like the ultimate, and so it's steps. So I don't even want to say, just know that what I'm talking about isn't like something that you immediately get to, and that I'm not there for sure. Like, I have many ways to go. So it's just understanding that there is a set of standards that we can aspire to be, and understanding that our soul, like we're here. I ultimately believe that we are here to polish our souls. Correct. Over time through all the tribulations, and even I just want to quickly jump back to like that philosopher's stone aspect where there's people who are looking for a shortcut to convert or transmute something into something greater, and understanding that we had to start with the basics and purify ourselves and build up from there, and that through that aspect, through that evolution process, we can reach this place of transcending, and also understanding that it takes time, and you gotta do everything with love and selflessness, and not do it so that you can gain some type of powers or whatever and then boast about it and be praised for it.
It's interesting you say that, especially when you use the analogy for the philosopher's stone. There's this guy who I've been watching lately. His name's Kevin Samuels, and like he talks more so about like the black community, obviously, because like you can relate more towards them. But he talks about men and women and their self-improvement to be like high value men, high value women, right? He uses analogies like, oh, she's a PhD or he's a CIA. And PhD is like an independent woman, don't need a man, this and that. But he's saying if you're a PhD woman, you're most likely going to die alone because you're not willing to submit to a man, especially if you're a biblical woman. In the Bible, it says you need to submit to a man to allow him to lead, to be the head of the family. And the CIA man is like, you need to build yourself to the greatest being you can be so you can be that leader for your household family. It's just so interesting. Like, as much as he wants to like balance it out, it's just that, like, I'm completely happy for like women in their empowerment, women that, having the freedom to do what they want. There's plenty of like CEO women who are just straight up badasses killing the game right now. I'm proud for them because like they've been suppressed for so many years and stuff like that.
Right.
So, not being able to have a voice and stuff like that. But it's also created like an echo chamber for a lot of women, especially on social media, and they almost feel like they need to have a top tier guy, and they're not. Some of them are not top tier, so just because they see the representation of other women who've done it for themselves, and they feel like they can get to that level too, and they feel like they need to have a high value man. And what Kevin Samuel does when he's 53, you know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So, I don't know his name, but. Yeah.
He's the one who called out that one woman. She was like, "You're a 6 at best." Yeah, that's
unrealistic. Yeah.
So it's like, he's not talking like high value women. He's talking more so women who think they're high value, or like who have one. They had a perfect relationship. They had a husband, maybe a cheater or whatever. I don't know. They could have worked it out. They had kids with that person. They got out of that relationship. Now they're looking for a high value man, and he's like, "Swear, that's not gonna work." Like, it's not going to work because, like, one, like you said, it's like you're trying to look from lead to gold, trying to find that shortcut for somebody else to take care of your kids, right? And this one woman, she had 2 sons, and he asked her this question, like, all right, if your son became, like, a great attorney, started making, like, 6 figures, 8 figures a year, and he said, he came home and was like, Mom, I'm getting ready to marry this woman, and she has 2 kids. Would you be proud of your son, or would you be happy for him? Most likely not at first, because it's like, why don't you go start your own family, right? Like,
that's deep.
You know what I'm saying? Like, it's like those type of women are looking for shortcuts. You know what I'm saying? Like,
it's the illusion, or the disillusionment.
And I kind of blame the echo chamber, because like I see a lot more so like I'm not trying to pick on women, but when you look on certain women's posts, there's like an echo chamber of like women just like commenting on other women's posts. It's not like, unless it's like a really thirsty man, it's a thirst trap. Other than that, it's just an echo chamber. So of course everybody in that chamber gonna think they're right, and they're not getting like outside perspective, or especially if it comes from like a man. And it's like, okay, this is getting in trouble, because like, do this 10 years down the road when you're actually looking for somebody. I kind of feel bad for him, because like, yo, like, are you gonna be thinking the same thing 10 years down the road when you're really trying to be serious with somebody, but you still have that type of mindset?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. And I like definitely, like, I'm in a relationship now, but before, just years back, and just spending time doing a lot of dating, like, I have come across those examples where you can tell someone just was more so entitled and they want to see what I can do for them, but it's like you're lacking in these certain qualities. And some, like, ultimately I do blame patriarchy, because there was a time where there's cultures that practice matriarchy and or more of a dualistic approach. And I love those civilizations when I study them and I see how the women were regarded so highly, like as wisdom, and even with symbology. So very quickly, so man is said to stand for knowledge and woman for wisdom, and with knowledge and wisdom comes understanding. You literally have the child, the offspring, standing under both parents, and so that balance, when you look for your partner, there's those governing aspects that I look for, because I know with my, like, everyone has to balance or find their balance with their masculine and feminine energies.
Correct.
And in your household, that there's no like standard for that, as far as like there's no cookie cutter way to explain that for every relationship, because there's relationships where the woman might have more of the masculine energy than the man, and that's perfectly fine. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. So I do feel like we're reaching, like, especially with quarantine, the rest in peace to everybody that's passed away, for sure.
Definitely.
So definitely want to take a moment to say that. But if we are focused on the positives, we've been forced to really take a look at ourselves and inwards, and look at these things. And I do see us getting to a point where, like, the feminine and masculine, the negative connotations of that, like, even for men, acknowledging the feminine side and just understanding that as far as, like, the arts, the creative side, and the emotions, and the masculine is like more of the outward. So feminine is like more the inward expressions, and the masculine is outward, and how we have to balance. Everyone has to balance those.
Find the yin and yang between that.
And every relationship has a different yin and yang, like, ratio or whatever. But as long as they find their ratio, that works for them.
Yeah.
And there's so many different couples that you can see, like, examples where, like, the girlfriend's like, you want me to go, like, oh, food's not right, you want me to go up to the front and say something, while the guy might just be more relaxed and chill, and, like, he doesn't really care. Like, it's things like that, where that balance can work, because his calmness, his type of energy can then work around and be that type of energy that grounds the whole relationship, or vice versa, where the man might be more ready, like the testosterone to do something, and the woman is one that grounds him. So just understanding.
They just have to come to that balance of, like, understanding each other at the same time. But it's getting hard. It depends on the person and their personality, but it's just getting more and more harder the older you get. So that's why I like when people find, like, who they're with now, like, I'm like, congratulations, because it's only gonna get harder the older you get, just only because, like I said before, like, there's people who are looking for the philosopher's stone, the gold digging, right? And then you gotta look for people who don't have as much emotional baggage and have done their shadow work, because, like I said before, that quote, like, if you don't deal with your childhood traumas with your own self, it's going to come out in your relationships. Yeah. So it's just like, it's only going to, the longer you wait to get with someone, especially in 30s, it's just, the more you're going to have to understand them from a fundamental aspect. And yeah, it's going to take time through, like, dating. It's going to take time through, like, talking and understanding who they are. Trying to understand, why is that person guard so up? And do you want to deal with that? Right? Like, you don't have to, right? You have options. You don't have to deal with that.
Right.
But, yeah, I didn't want to, like, go off a tangent about Kevin Samuels. It's just more so when you brought up the Philosopher's Stone, I was just like, yeah, that's perfect. Because, like, it's just, I think the bigger problem, and it's coming to full circle now, right? Like, you complain about men having an entitlement, and now you're seeing, like, women having entitlement, and now it's just like it's coming in full circle. It's just now you're seeing it's just human beings, it's just human nature. It's not just
human nature, literally.
Man or woman. It's just human nature. And if you're in that echo chamber, you're gonna think you're right? Like, you're gonna have a cognitive bias, right? Like, you're gonna think you're right because everybody who says they have similarities, or, like, feel like they have similarities, right? Because offensive women are emotional creatures, so if they feel like they have that similarity, they're gonna join that echo chamber.
Right.
So.
Yeah,
I just think it's just very interesting, and that's why I brought that topic up. But I think we're like, Brian, how many minutes are we in now? Almost an hour. I think we can start closing up. If you have any more like closing thoughts, get into it.
Spirituality, just know that the art of spirituality is just stepping into knowing that we are connected to something greater than all of us.
Correct.
Whatever that may be, and that there's no journey that is alike. But just being open and selfless, working on being selfless and catching yourself to the moments where we are selfish, because that's so easy to do in everything. And just understanding what your ego is. And through this, you can go through different ego deaths, which makes it even harder to connect to the people that are just around you on a day-to-day basis. You might feel isolated or like you're alone on your journey, but know that you're not really alone, and that there's so many other people out there around the world that are going through similar, not the same exact journey, but they might be feeling those same exact feelings. But just to stay positive and know that the more you put into it, you're going to attract your soul tribe too, which I feel like happens. Like, you know, like I don't know if you remember, but like in 10th grade, I knew about the frequency and like wavelengths, and like whenever I'm thinking of a friend and then they call me or vice versa, like I would be like, the frequency. And,
yeah, I remember you saying that. Yeah, I actually remember you saying that, because Ricky would say that all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But like that's that, and you know, just growing on top of that, and you know, trying to keep yourself pure in the soul and happy and enjoying life. Definitely appreciate you bringing me on here, man.
No problem, bro. No problem, man.
Been bros for a long time.
No problem, bro.
Yeah, man.
But I was going to tap into exactly what you just said. I forgot what from your closing thought. Pure heart. Selfishness. Okay, so like I agree with being selfless, right? Because there's so many people who are selfish, but if you can't take care of yourself first, you know what I mean? Like you got to take care of your like emotional intelligence, your well-being, understanding who you are, be able to feed yourself, to be able to be in a position to take care of others or something that's higher than you. I guess that's something that wouldn't just happen to.
Have you heard of like the different densities of consciousness? So it's real quick, but that's exactly what you said. So like 1D, one density, the first density is, think of inorganic material like rocks, waters, plants, things like that. I can't remember which philosopher said, but like everything has a soul in it. Like the objects have a soul. So think of like 1D as inorganic material. 2D, think of that as insects and animals that are just governed by instincts, primitive drives. And then 3D, you get to the humans. That's where most of the world is on. And then 4D is then understanding how to direct your energy, as far as it can be governed for service to self, or service to others. But it's understanding that there's a decision to do so, and that by doing that, that's then going to help create how your life trajectory is going to be. And then 5D is when you really like epitomize what that is. You make your decision and you're operating on it. And so like people that are service to self, think of those as like the rich. You think of those as like managers or certain CEOs who are very rich, but they don't really have too many people or friends to enjoy that with. And that's because their entire life it's been me. And because of that, they've manifested a lot, but they don't have these other aspects of their life. Service to others, you can think of those people who like join the Peace Corps or different like missionary trips. They don't really have money possessions, but they might have a lot of friends. And if they don't have a certain balance, they burn themselves out, to your point. And so understanding that you have to be conscious with your energy and knowing that there's a balance. Like for me, I want to be a service to others, but I had to ground myself and know that if I don't take care of myself, I can't help other people.
Yeah, at all.
And so then it brings me back to like, that's okay. Step one is I need to make sure, you know, my money's straight, I'm working, I'm taking care of my health, all these aspects. If I'm not whole here, how can I help other people? And so I just wanted to say that to his point, as far as, you know, knowing you got to be conscious with your energy and move with intention. Take care of yourself so you can take care of other people. If you are gonna decide to be more selfish in your life, you need to understand you have to balance that. You need to help other people so that way other people can also help you achieve whatever you're trying to achieve. So
that's dope. That's a dope ending. Closing thoughts. I like it. But yeah, just give your social media plugins for our audience members.
So yeah, definitely check me out. You can follow me at This Mind of Mine, the O's a Zero, or the Greater Thinking Collective. A lot more content's coming on the way in 2021. I also have a website, greaterthinking.org. It's not launched yet, but it's in the works. So definitely stay tuned. And I know we'll definitely do some things, some collaborations in the future.
Yeah, it's dope. And my social media plugins, once again, it's Prince Nigma across the board, Instagram, Twitter. And yeah, you follow me for more content. And we also have a platform for N.Cast Podcast. So and that's on Instagram and Twitter too. So yeah. So until next time, appreciate y'all.
Tap in. Be safe. 2021.
2021. Peace.
Tap in, years 21, coming with attention, trying to make them M's. Babe, bring a friend, she told me she had a twin, told them let's make amends. Don't care if you black, Latino, or Asian. If the cash flowing, baby, you persuading. Rich dad, poor dad, oh, you mean business? Let's invest in properties down Texas. Baby, don't tease. Your best features is your credit score, please. Blessing coming in fast indeed. Knowing on the right track, she's intrigued. Now we traveling out in Belize, throwing that ass on the balcony. Best believe she'll do it for a king who knows how to lead. Yeah, you know I'm that king. This, that, enter that, bring back kings. Hold high stands and say what they mean. Best believe she'll follow your lead while you crush big dreams and put on.